In 2006, a team of researchers at the University of Washington put on caveman masks and walked into a flock of crows. They trapped some of the crows and tagged them and then let them go. Pretty standard wildlife research. But here's where it gets strange. Now, years later, when anyone walked through that same area wearing those same masks, the crows went berserk, dive bombing, screaming, recruiting other crows to join in. Crows that weren't even alive during the original experiment had learned to hate those faces. Think about that. A bird with a brain the size of a walnut remembered a specific human face, held a grudge for years, and then taught that grudge to its children. So the question isn't whether crows can recognize your face. The question is, what have you done to make the crows remember you? Before we get into the science, let's talk about who we're actually dealing with. Crows belong to a family of birds called corvids. That family includes ravens, magpies, jackdaws, and jays. And as a group, they are, by almost every measure scientists use, the most intelligent birds on the planet. Relative to their body size, crows have one of the largest brains of any animals on Earth, bigger proportionally than chimpanzees. And brain size relative to body size is one of the key indicators scientists use to predict cognitive ability. And crows use that brain in ways that genuinely surprise researchers. They use tools, they plan for the future, they solve multi-step puzzles. They play, not out of survival instinct, but apparently for fun. New Caledonian crows, a species found in the South Pacific, have been observed crafting hooks out of twigs to fish grubs out of holes. That's not instinct, that's problem solving, and that is manufacturing. Now here's the thing that trips people up. When most of us think about smart animals, we think of the obvious ones. Dolphins, elephants, great apes, animals with big body and brains. But crows evolved their intelligence completely independently from animals. Separate branch of the tree of life. Completely different brain structures, and yet they land in almost exactly the same cognitive space. Scientists call this convergent evolution. Nature essentially solved the problem of intelligence twice, once in primates and once in corvids. Now, let's go back to the University of Washington's experiment, because the researchers didn't just observe crows reacting to the masks. They went much deeper than that. To make sure crows were actually recognizing the faces, and not just reacting to the shape of the masks, or the color of the jacket, the team ran a series of controlled tests. They wore the dangerous caveman mask upside down. They wore it inside out. They switched masks between researchers. And every time, the crows responded to the face, not to the person wearing it. Not the clothes, not the body, or the face. Now, you might assume crows see the world the way we do, and that's simply reading faces the way a human would, but that's not quite right. Crows have eyes on the side of their faces, which give them almost a 300-degree field of vision. And unlike us, they can see into the ultraviolet spectrum. They're literally perceiving a version of reality that we can't even process. And yet, despite seeing the world so differently, they are processing human faces with a level of detail and precision that rivals our own ability to tell people apart. Here's where it gets fascinating from a neuroscience perspective. In humans, facial recognition is handled by a dedicated region of the brain called the fusiform face area. It's specialized, it's fast, and damage to it causes a condition called the prosopagnosia, which is the inability to recognize faces, even of people you know well. Crows don't have this region. Their brain structure is completely different to ours. They don't even have a cortex in the way that mammals do. And yet, researchers when scanning the brains of crows has found a region called the nippopallium, or NCL for short, which lights up when crows were showing human faces they've recognized and have negative experiences with. The brain was reacting differently to a known threat to them rather than a neutral stranger. Let that sit for a second. A completely different brain architecture, built by a completely different branch of evolution, independently developed the ability to look at a human face and store it as a memory. attach an emotional tag to it, and retrieve it years later with enough precision to act on it. That's not a reflex. That's not instincts. That is memory. That is recognition. That is, in every meaningful sense of the word, a grudge. But what makes this ability truly remarkable isn't that a single crow can remember your face. It's what happened next. When the crow goes home and starts talking. Crows are not solitary animals. They live in tight-knit family groups. They roost together in flocks that can number in the thousands, and they are almost constantly communicating with each other. And what they communicate about, research have found, includes you. When a crow identifies a threat, a predator, a rival, or a human they had bad experiences with, they do something called scolding. A loud, repetitive alarm call that is essentially a broadcast signal to every crow nearby. Other crows hear that call and flies in, not just to watch, but to look. They're actively observing the threat, studying it, and memorizing it. In the University of Washington's follow-up study, the numbers told the story clearly. When researchers first wore the dangerous mask, 26 crows responded with scolding. A year later, without any new trapping incidents, 47 crows were reacting to the same face. The threat had more than doubled, spread entirely through social observation. But here's the part that should really make you stop and think. This isn't just happening between crows that were there. It's happening across generations. Parent crows actively teach their fledglings. When a known threat appears, the adult crow will bring their youngs to watch. The juvenile observes the mobby behavior, hears the alarm call, and locks that face into memory before they've ever had a bad experience with that person themselves. Think about what that means. A crow that has never wronged, never trapped, never threatened will hate your face, because its mother told it to, because its grandmother's flock passed down the warning like a story around a campfire. That is not normal animal behavior in the most ways that we were taught to think about it. That is culture, that is oral history in birds. Now, if crows can pass down a grudge across generations, the obvious next question is whether the same thing works in the other direction. And the answer, it turns out, is yes. Crows remember kindness just as precisely as they remember cruelty. In Seattle, a young girl named Gabby Mann started to leave out food for the crows in her neighborhood, mostly peanuts. Every day, rain or shine, she'd feel a little dish on the fence and wait. The crows noticed, and then slowly, they started to leave things back. A small black button, a broken pearl earring, a rusted screw, a tiny piece of metal with the word "best" stamped onto it, as if the crow had gone looking specifically for a compliment. Gabby kept every single one. She catalogued them in a box filled with little labels. She called the crows her friends, and by any reasonable measure, they were. Now, Gabby's story is charming, but it's not a one-off. Researchers and wildlife observers have documented this pattern repeatedly. Crows bring objects to people who feed them regularly. Shiny things mostly, and occasionally useful things. Sometimes, inexplicably, a single French fry. The question scientists wrestle with is what's actually happening here. Is this a deliberate gift, or is it something else? The current theories on this matter is nuanced. Crows do engage in reciprocal behavior. They help other crows who have helped them. They share foods with allies, and they remember who has been generous and who hasn't. That much is well established. Whether the object-leaving behavior is a conscious gift in the way humans gift presents, that's still debated. But what is not debated is that crows are keeping scores. They know who's feeding them, they know who ignores them, and they know who has wronged them. They maintain something that looks remarkably like a social ledger. And this is what makes the grudge story from chapter 1 land so differently once you understand the full picture. It's not that crows are uniquely vengeful, it's that they are treating every interaction, positive or negative, as information about who you are. You're not just a shape to them. You're not just a source of food or potential threat. You are, in some meaningful sense, a known individual, a character in their world with a history, a reputation, and a relationship to maintain. As stated in the findings by University of Washington, if you shoo a crow away today, it will remember. If you leave food for one tomorrow, it will remember that too. The ledger is always open. This raises the deepest question of all. Why? Why would a bird evolve this level of social complexity? Why does remembering a single human face matter so much that nature builds an entire cognitive system around it? To answer that, we need to go back about 1,000,000 years and look at the pressures that made crows who they are. So corvids, which the crows belong in, have been on this planet for roughly 17 million years. For most of that time, there were no humans, no cities, no researchers in caveman masks, just a world full of predators, competitors, and very limited food. So the question isn't really, why do crows remember human faces? The deeper question is, what were the evolutionary pressures that built a brain capable of remembering faces at all? Crows are what biologists call generalists. They don't have one food source, one habitat, one fixed way of surviving. They eat almost anything, live almost anywhere, and adapt to almost any situation. That flexibility is their superpower. But flexibility comes at a cost. When your survival depends on reading a constantly changing environment, knowing which animals are dangerous, which patches of land are safe, which individuals can be trusted, a simple rigid brain just doesn't cut it. You need something that can learn, update, and remember. And crows are far from being alone in this category of animals that can remember faces. Across the animal kingdom, individual recognition, the ability to tell one specific member of an animal species apart from another, tends to show up in the same kind of animals. It is the animals that are social, animals with complex group dynamics and a lot to gain from remembering the things around them. However, what's striking is that crows share none of these animals' evolutionary history. They're not mammals, they're not primates. They didn't inherit this ability from a common ancestor. They built it themselves, from scratch, because of the environmental pressures. The complexity, the competition which they have to face, kept selecting the crows that has the ability to recognize faces apart. It's just a matter of natural evolution.